Many questions you'll face on exam day are designed to challenge your critical thinking. In our new series, we're going to challenge you with questions that will really make you think, starting with contracts and agency. And don't miss what's happening in the bottom corner. It's designed to supercharge your exam prep. We'll explain more in just a minute. Let's dive in and get started.
Real estate contracts, fundamentals. Essential elements of a valid contract. Which of the following elements in a real estate contract is often misunderstood as merely a handshake agreement? Is it A, consideration, B, mutual assent, C, legal purpose, or D, capacity? The answer is B, mutual assent. Why this may seem tricky. Handshake agreements are informal and often confused with mutual assent. A valid contract requires more than just mutual understanding. It necessitates clear, documented consent. Mutual assent implies a meeting of the minds, which is documented and not just implied. What element of a real estate contract might be questioned if one party is a minor? Is it A, consideration, B, mutual assent, C, legal purpose, or D, capacity? The answer is D, capacity. Why this may seem tricky. Capacity is often overlooked when parties focus on other contract elements. A minor typically lacks legal capacity to enter into a binding contract, which can render the contract voidable.
Have you noticed the code in the bottom corner? Next time you're stumped, take that code to birdsy.ai for immediate help and a free study session with Birdsy, your personal AI study partner. Plus, you'll get access to hundreds of additional questions, helping you move closer to passing your exam with confidence. The next time you're feeling unsure or stuck, give it a try.
Which element of a real estate contract is most at risk if the contract terms are vague and open to interpretation? Is it A, mutual assent, B, consideration, C, legal purpose, or D, capacity? The answer is A, mutual assent. Why this may seem tricky. Vague terms can lead to misunderstandings about mutual assent. Clear, precise language is necessary to ensure both parties agree to the same terms, avoiding disputes. Which element is most likely to be invalid if a real estate contract involves illegal activities? Is it A, consideration, B, mutual assent, C, legal purpose, or D? The answer is C, legal purpose. Why this may seem tricky. Contracts involving illegal activities are void due to their lack of a legal purpose. Legal purpose ensures that the contract complies with the law, making it enforceable. Types of contracts: express, implied, bilateral, unilateral. A property owner verbally agrees to sell their house to a buyer who then pays a deposit. Which type of contract could this represent, and what is the risk of assuming it's enforceable? Is it A, implied contract, B, express contract, C, unilateral contract, or D, bilateral contract? The answer is B, express contract. Why this may seem tricky. Verbal agreements can be misunderstood as enforceable contracts. An express contract requires clear terms, usually in writing, to avoid disputes. Without written evidence, enforceability is questionable. A landlord offers a tenant a discount if they pay rent early. Which type of contract does this represent, and what might cause confusion about its nature? Is it A, unilateral contract, B, implied contract, C, express contract, or D, bilateral contract? The answer is D, bilateral contract. Why this may seem tricky. The promise of a discount suggests a unilateral contract, but the tenant's promise to pay early creates a bilateral agreement. Both parties have obligations. A real estate agent tells a buyer that they will reduce their commission if the buyer closes a deal within a month. Which type of contract is this most likely to represent? Is it A, express contract, B, bilateral contract, C, unilateral contract, or D, Implied contract. The answer is C, unilateral contract. Why this may seem tricky. The scenario involves a promise by the agent, but it depends on the buyer's action to be fulfilled. This creates a unilateral contract. A unilateral contract involves a promise in exchange for an act, not a reciprocal promise.
If you're finding this helpful, please take a minute to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more practice exams, useful tips, and complimentary study sessions with Birdsy.
Offer, counteroffer, and acceptance. In a real estate transaction, which of the following actions could result in an unintended acceptance of an offer? Is it A, requesting more information about the property? B, starting repairs on the property as outlined in the offer? C, discussing potential counteroffers with a broker? Or D, refusing to sign the purchase agreement? The answer is B, starting repairs on the property as outlined in the offer. Why this may seem tricky. The scenario involves actions that might seem unrelated to acceptance. Acceptance can be implied through actions that align with the terms of the offer, even without explicit agreement. Which of the following statements about counteroffers is most accurate? Is it A, a counteroffer keeps the original offer valid while adding new terms? B, a counteroffer is an acceptance of the original offer with modifications? C, a counteroffer nullifies the original offer and proposes new terms? Or D, a counteroffer can be accepted without the need for further negotiation? The answer is C, a counteroffer nullifies the original offer and proposes new terms. Why this may seem tricky. The options contain similar wording that can confuse test takers. A counteroffer effectively nullifies the original offer, creating a new offer that requires acceptance. Which of the following scenarios would likely lead to an invalid acceptance of a real estate offer? Is it A, accepting the offer verbally without notifying the offeror? B, signing the offer and returning it to the offeror? C, sending a signed acceptance via email to the offeror? Or D, indicating acceptance in a text message to the offeror? The answer is A, accepting the offer verbally without notifying the offeror. Why this may seem tricky. The scenarios involve actions that might seem like valid acceptance. Acceptance must be clear, unequivocal, and communicated to the offeror to be valid. Consideration and legal purpose. In a real estate contract, which of the following scenarios might invalidate the contract due to a lack of legal purpose? Is it A, an agreement to sell a property with existing tenants? B, a contract to purchase land for a community park? C, an agreement to use a property for illegal gambling? Or D, a lease agreement for a commercial property? The answer is C, an agreement to use a property for illegal gambling. Why this may seem tricky. The scenario includes legal and illegal purposes. A contract for an illegal activity, such as zoning violations, lacks legal purpose and is unenforceable. This can be confusing if not carefully analyzed. Which of the following statements regarding consideration in a real estate contract is misleading? Is it A, consideration can include services rendered? B, consideration is only monetary compensation? C, consideration may involve a promise to act? Or D, consideration must be something of value? The answer is B, consideration is only monetary compensation. Why this may seem tricky. The statement uses only, which can be misleading. Consideration can be a promise, money, or an act, not just monetary. This common misbelief can lead to confusion. Which of the following could render a real estate contract unenforceable due to a lack of valid consideration? Is it A, a promise to not enforce a legal right without compensation? B, a promise to pay for property upon delivery? C, a mutual agreement to exchange properties? Or D, a promise to provide maintenance services in exchange for rent reduction? The answer is a promise to not enforce a legal right without compensation. Why this may seem tricky, the scenario involves a promise to do nothing, which isn't valid consideration. It tests understanding that consideration must involve some form of exchange or obligation. Contract performance and discharge. In a real estate contract, which of the following conditions could lead to the discharge of the contract due to impossibility of performance? Is it A, the buyer's financial hardship, B, the property being destroyed by a natural disaster, C, the seller's refusal to sell, or D, a change in market conditions? The answer is B, the property being destroyed by a natural disaster. Why this may seem tricky, the term impossibility can be confused with impracticality or inconvenience. Impossibility of performance occurs when unforeseen events make it impossible to fulfill the contract terms, like a property's destruction. Which of the following is an example of discharge by mutual agreement in a real estate contract? Is it A, the buyer's unilateral withdrawal, B, the seller finding a better offer, C, the buyer failing to obtain financing, or D, both parties agreeing to rescind the contract? The answer is D, both parties agreeing to rescind the contract. Why this may seem tricky, mutual agreement may be confused with unilateral actions. Discharge by mutual agreement occurs when both parties agree to terminate the contract, such as through a rescission. Which statement about the doctrine of substantial performance in real estate contracts is not correct? Is it A, it allows for minor deviations from contract terms, B, it requires all contract terms to be fully met without exception, C, it can result in payment adjustments, or D, it may apply if the main purpose of the contract is achieved? The answer is C, it can result in payment adjustments. Why this may seem tricky, substantial performance is often misunderstood. It allows a contract to be fulfilled if most terms are met, but the incomplete parts can affect the outcome, like payment adjustments.
Don't forget to comment below with your tips, challenges, and thoughts on exam preparation. Your experiences can make a big difference for others.
Breach of contract and remedies. In a real estate contract, if a seller breaches by failing to deliver the deed, which remedy allows the buyer to seek monetary compensation for the breach? Is it A, specific performance, B, compensatory damages, C, rescission, or D, liquidated damages? The answer is B, compensatory damages. Why this may seem tricky, the question includes irrelevant details about the deed, which might mislead test takers. The correct remedy is compensatory damages, which allows the buyer to recover monetary losses caused by the seller's breach. In a real estate contract, if a buyer breaches by failing to secure financing, which remedy allows the seller to retain the earnest money deposit? Is it A, specific performance, B, rescission, C, liquidated damages, or D, punitive damages? The answer is C, liquidated damages. Why this may seem tricky, the question involves understanding the specific remedy available to sellers when buyers fail to perform. Retaining the earnest money deposit is often stipulated as liquidated damages, a pre-agreed remedy for breach. Agency relationships and responsibilities. Creation of agency express implied ratification estoppel. A real estate agent shows a property to a buyer multiple times without a formal agreement. The buyer later buys the property and pays the agent a commission. What type of agency might this situation illustrate? Is it A, express agency, B, agency by estoppel, C, implied agency, or D, agency by ratification? The answer is C, implied agency. Why this may seem tricky, the absence of a formal agreement can lead to confusion. This scenario illustrates implied agency, where actions suggest an agency relationship without explicit agreement. A business owner tells a client that their assistant has the authority to negotiate contracts, even though they never gave such authority. The client relies on this statement. What type of agency could this create? Is it A, express agency, B, implied agency, C, agency by ratification, or D, agency by estoppel? The answer is D, agency by estoppel. Why this may seem tricky, the owner's statement might confuse test takers. This creates agency by estoppel, where the owner's representation leads the client to believe in the assistant's authority. Types of agency: single, dual, designated, transaction broker. A real estate agent represents a buyer in a transaction. The seller is unrepresented. Which type of agency relationship is this most likely to represent? Is it A, dual agency, B, designated agency, C, single agency, or D, transaction broker? The answer is C, single agency. Why this may seem tricky. The scenario might suggest dual agency, but the seller is unrepresented. This is a single agency where the agent represents only the buyer, making it a clear single agency relationship. In a real estate transaction, an agent represents both the buyer and seller, but the agency agreement specifies the agent owes fiduciary duties only to the seller. What type of agency is this? Is it A, single agency, B, designated agency, C, transaction broker, or D, dual agency with special fiduciary duty? The answer is D, dual agency with special fiduciary duty. Why this may seem tricky. The mention of fiduciary duties might suggest single agency, but representing both parties indicates dual agency. However, the specific fiduciary duty to the seller makes this a special case of dual agency.
Notice the code in the corner? When you're stumped by a question, enter it at birdsy.ai for immediate help. Enjoy complimentary study sessions and access to hundreds of additional questions to help you pass your exam with confidence.
Fiduciary duties. An agent is showing a property to a buyer who is also a client. The agent knows the seller is desperate to sell quickly. Which fiduciary duty is at risk if the agent discloses this to the buyer? Is it A, loyalty, B, obedience, C, confidentiality, or D, reasonable care? The answer is C, confidentiality. Why this may seem tricky. The scenario involves multiple fiduciary duties, but the focus is on confidentiality. An agent must protect the seller's confidential information, even if it benefits the buyer. Disclosing this would breach the duty of confidentiality. Which fiduciary duty requires an agent to act in the best interests of their client, even if it means advising against the client's initial desires? Is it A, disclosure, B, C, accountability, or D, obedience? The answer is B, loyalty. Why this may seem tricky. The question may lead you to think of obedience, but loyalty is about prioritizing the client's best interests, even if it contradicts their initial wishes. Loyalty sometimes requires advising against a client's desires for their benefit. Disclosure requirements and conflicts of interest. Which of the following is not required when a real estate agent is representing both the buyer and the seller in a transaction? Is it A, disclosing the dual agency relationship to both parties, B, maintaining confidentiality of each party's financial details, C, obtaining separate appraisals for both parties, or D, securing written consent from both parties? The answer is C, obtaining separate appraisals for both parties. Why this may seem tricky. The question uses negative wording, which can easily confuse. The correct answer is obtaining separate appraisals for both parties, as agents are not required to arrange appraisals. Which statement about disclosure requirements in agency relationships is false? Is it A, agents must disclose any material facts about the property, B, agents always disclose any personal interest in a transaction, C. Disclosure of agency relationships must occur at first substantive contact. Or D. Failure to disclose a conflict of interest can lead to legal consequences. The answer is B. Agents always disclose any personal interest in a transaction. Why this may seem tricky. The question asks for a false statement, and the options are similar. The false statement is agents always disclose personal interest, as not all personal interests must be disclosed. Termination of agency relationships. Which of the following does not automatically terminate an agency relationship by operation of law? Is it A. Death of the principal, B. Bankruptcy of the agent, C. Change in market conditions, or D. Loss of license by the agent? The answer is C. Change in market conditions. Why this may seem tricky. The question uses negative wording, asking for what does not cause termination. The death of an agent or principal, bankruptcy, and loss of license do terminate, but change in market conditions does not.
Thanks for joining us today. If you found this video helpful, subscribe to our channel for more practice exams, tips, and tricks. And don't forget to visit Birdsy.ai for complimentary study sessions with Birdsy, your AI-powered study partner.